Good morning. Oh, you're on mute.
You would think after months of doing this.
We have been doing this for the past 10 years, just about. And every time I'm with my advisor, I'm like, guys, you're on mute. I can't hear you. So, no, it doesn't get better.
Oh my gosh. How are you this morning?
I am good. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good. Well, I'm Jeanette. I'm the director for the Atlantic Midwest region.
Awesome.
So we work with our schools in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Wisconsin, all the way over to DC, Virginia, Maryland. So,
Very cool.
Yeah, happy to be here for you guys today.
Awesome. 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 And I have my colleague, Catherine Schultz, should be joining us soon as well, who will be co-presenting with me.
And I am going to make you a co-host right now. So I will continue to let people in as they come in, or if people come in the middle of the session.
Okay.
In terms of the chat right now, it is set so that anyone can chat, or anyone can chat to everyone instead of just you. That's fine.
That's beautiful.
Okay. And then last question is, there's a ding when people enter so that you're kind of aware.
Sure.
But I know with a session like this, it'll ding when people enter, chime when they leave. Do you want that on, or would you rather I turn that off?
You can turn it off.
Okay.
Let them flow.
Perfect. There we go. And then in terms of share, it sounds like you've been doing this, so you're probably fine sharing your screen. Do you want to practice what you're sharing, or are you good?
A little testy poo. All right. So we will do this. I just want to make sure I can hear.
Oh, and Catherine is here too.
Use that. Awesome. Are you seeing the presentation just fine?
Yep, just the presentation. So you are perfect.
Perfect. Hi, Catherine. Oh, she's connecting.
Good morning.
You're on mute. Mute.
Oh. Zoom 101.
Yeah.
We were just talking about this, though, that we've been using Zoom for about 10 years. And every meeting I have with my advisors, I still have to let them know you're on mute. So it doesn't get any better.
I love it. I love it. Well, good. I think then we're pretty much set, Jeanette.
Perfect.
Awesome. So you'll handle people coming in, so we don't need to worry about that. And then Catherine and Jeanette shared that chat will be open to all.
Okay, let me open up. Am I a co-presenter so that I can view the chats?
Oh, good question. You are not. Let me make you right now.
Okay.
And there you go. So yeah, if you guys need anything, I will be here, but I will mute myself now.
Awesome. 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 All right, Catherine, I think we're in good shape.
Okay.
And I'll keep an eye on chat in the first part, and then we'll flip. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. And you'll kind of advance. You'll know when to kind of move me.
Yep.
And if I get the hook, I'll know to move. Maybe.
Too funny. All right. Well, if we're set, I will be.
Okay.
This coffee mug is for you, this ladies, this morning. Mhm.
Why, thank you.
That's an awesome mug.
Working remotely for so long, taking care of most communications over video, right? You gotta have a little fun now and again.
So as people start to join, did you want me to wait right until 10 o'clock to let them in, or do you want them kind of trickling in as they come?
What is the best practice? I have no feelings about it.
Usually right at 10 o'clock. Okay.
Perfect.
Sorry.
All right. I will let everyone in.
Great.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. We'll just give it maybe another minute or so before we dive right in. Good morning. It's so nice to see everybody. Looks like we're still admitting a few people, so we'll just give it maybe another 30 seconds or so. Looks like a few people are still coming in. Just give it maybe, what do you think, Heather? Just a couple more seconds?
Another minute, yeah.
Okay. Let people freshen up their coffee after the first session and get into our session.
This is fun. Other than our virtual conference that we did in a live format, it's nice to see everyone's faces.
It sure is. I wish we were there in person, but this is fantastic that they were able to pull this together and we could come together in this forum.
Absolutely. Well, Catherine, why don't we go ahead and get rolling? And as folks join, they can join.
That sounds great. Well, thank you everybody for joining our session here today on behavioral intelligence, Giving Enrollment 2020 Vision, brought to you by Capture. I'm Catherine Schultz, Regional Consultant for Capture Higher Ed, and joining me today is Heather Mueller, our National Vice President and co-founder for Capture Higher Ed. Before we get started, I have a couple housekeeping items that they asked us to cover. They asked us to remind you to please complete your session evaluation after the session here today, and then also at the end of the conference to do your conference evaluation form as well. For those of you that are seeking the professional development credit, there is a certificate of attendance request form for the Act 48 credits, and all of the forms and the evaluations can be found at the bottom of the conference landing page. So now that I have those housekeeping items out of the way, let's dive in. Again, I'm Catherine Schultz. I'll give a brief introduction of myself, and then my colleague Heather will do the same. I have been with Capture for about 6 months, although I'm still relatively new to Capture. I'm definitely not new to higher education. I've been in higher ed for over 25 years. I started back in the late 80s working with faculty one-on-one, kind of course by course, program by program. And then I spent about a decade in online learning. And then for the past few years, I've been focused on working with leadership like yourself on your strategic priorities across campus. Heather, you want to give a quick introduction?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Heather Mueller. I'm the National Vice President for Enrollment Solutions. That's a fancy title for the head of sales at Capture. As Catherine mentioned, I'm also one of the co-founders of the company. So I have been with Capture since we were a piece of paper and followed the journey and had a ton of fun through time. I have been in higher ed my entire career. Before crossing the desk, I was a seated vice president for enrollment and student affairs at a small private out in the Midwest. But I've worked at public institutions, large, small, and medium, and private institutions as well. Really excited to be here with you all in this format, which I feel our session, right? The things that we're going to talk about today, I think fold very naturally into experiencing what is traditionally a live and in-person event in a virtual format. So having said all of that, please know that the chat is open. If you have any questions at any time, please don't hesitate. Catherine and I love to have a conversation and a dialogue as much as present the information. So please don't hesitate to use the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on it. as we go. So Catherine, I'm going to turn it over to you to start things off.
Well, fantastic. Thanks, Heather. Again, our topic today is behavioral intelligence. We believe at Capture that behavioral intelligence is really changing the way enrollment leaders can identify opportunities and measure success for both undergraduate and graduate admission strategies. So this session today is really going to introduce you to the power of behavioral intelligence. And we're going to give you some really good real world examples about how some of our current partners, universities and colleges are achieving those goals. So this is a kind of an encapsulation of our world in the past really 3 months or 12 weeks. So much has happened in 2020 already. It's hard to believe it's only June. But this year has definitely not been business as usual as we've all been experiencing. Usually, spring and early summer, we're kind of celebrating our successes. We're looking back and assessing the work that we've done and developed throughout the cycle. And really leveraging those efforts to take a look at, how the very conclusion of all of this is how our enrollment class is shaping up. But the events worldwide have really changed the way that we've had to operate. And so there are a lot of questions that abound. What is fall really going to look like? What do we do next? And how do we respond now? Are there things that we can do now to be responsive to all the things that are happening in the world today? And what is the plan for the remainder of the summer? Let's take a look. So today we're going to look at 3 ways that behavioral intelligence can give you that 2020 vision. Just to summarize real quick, 1, 2, 3, is how can behavioral intelligence allow you to get to know your audience of today better? 2, how can we add some tools to our toolbox that will help us with the changing environment, and how do we get started? But first, I want to level set real quick on what behavioral intelligence is. Behavioral intelligence really looks at the way a person's behavior, and to offer up timely and relevant information based on that behavior. Let's put that into context of our everyday. Think about how we as consumers interact on Amazon. Amazon uses behavioral intelligence and machine learning and begins to offer up some suggestions based on our behavior on their website. As does Netflix. We probably all are watching a little bit more Netflix today. So Netflix makes recommendations also based on our viewing history. My daughter really hates when I start to watch Netflix on her profile because then I mess up all the things that are the recommendations for her. So that is really what Capture has done. We've applied that behavioral intelligence and machine learning to the higher ed space. And behavioral intelligence is at the core of everything that we do at Capture. Heather, I'm going to have you go to the next.
Catherine, as we've been talking with our partners through time, and I'm sure many of you that are in the session today, a lot of the conversations, particularly over the last 3 months, right, as we've moved into virtual environments for our own work, and having to figure out how best to engage with our students and their families, the questions often are, how do we understand what they need now, right, when we can't necessarily see them on campus? Or how do we provide them with the ability to experience the institution in a way that is non-traditional, if you will, from most recruitment tactics in the world. And I feel like what behavioral intelligence has provided for the enrollment professionals that work with us is the ability to really see what the interests are of the students today, right now, in real time. So I think it's been a powerful conversation throughout time, but certainly over the last 3 to 4 months.
I'm just going to give a quick overview of who and what Capture is within the context of behavioral intelligence. And here's really how behavioral intelligence informs the rest of our software platform, as well as our solutions and services. There are 4 components. We're not going to really dive into all the components, although Heather will share some things as she gets into her portion of the presentation today. But the behavioral intelligence platform, it has the 4 components. It has Engage, and this is something Heather will dive into, but it also has Apply, Aid, and Enroll, which are a part of our behavioral intelligence platform predictive analytics suite. And then we also offer a continuum of solutions, all sorts of tools that enrollment managers today and marketing VPs use as well, but offered within the context of leveraging behavioral intelligence. Everything that we do and all the solutions that we provide are offered within that viewpoint. And then lastly, the services. Everything that we do at Capture is a managed service, so that we stand side by side with you on campus and really act as a staff multiplier with your team. And so along with your account executive, you'll see a list of the other team members that will become an extension of your team as we work together with you.
And I promise that's the end of the Capture commercial.
Yes.
The rest of it is all good content for you to be able to digest and hopefully take home some tools to be able to use with you and your team.
Yes, thank you. So step 1, how to deploy behavioral intelligence. Behavioral intelligence can be a really powerful recruitment tool for you and help you to get to understand and know your audience today. And that's really the critical word there, today. You know, as Heather was talking about, what are your prospective students doing today when they're not talking with you? Are they engaging with you and you just don't know it? And so that's really an important part of what behavioral intelligence can offer you in understanding your audience and what is important to them, and how you can reach out to them with that timely and relevant information. So for example, we know that Gen Zers are all real tech savvy. I have 3 Gen Zers in my house right now. Most of them are still sleeping in. But how has that changed, that kind of tech savvy? How has that changed as a result of COVID? It's actually upped their game, so to speak. I mean, they've had to, after spring break, transition into virtual classes. They've had virtual doctor's appointments now, and even for my senior in high school, virtual proms. What about the parents like myself? We're a little bit less tech savvy than our Gen Zer kids, but hey, here we are today, pretty comfortable in Zoom and sharing our ideas. So let's take a look at a couple things. We know that everything now is virtual. We've all had to move to this virtual environment. Students are more reliant on the web and the virtual world more than ever. You know, how are they entertaining themselves? They're definitely watching Netflix, probably all of us are, and YouTube. And you'll see the increases there, 16% increase in Netflix usage and 15% increase in YouTube. But how are these students making their college decisions? So we took a look in our current partner database of the 50 million visits that our current partners have been experiencing. And we saw a dip in when COVID first hit, and there was a drop and people were really kind of pausing and trying to evaluate what was going on. But then, like our Gen Zers, for example, really rallied and they really got back up in there and went into the environment that they're most comfortable, and that is the virtual world. And we saw a skyrocketing increase of 37%, and you kind of compare that to the increase that Netflix and YouTube shared. There was a massive increase in virtual engagement on our partner websites.
You know, Catherine, one of the things that we have seen through time, and as you mentioned, we have tracked over 50 million site interactions, right? And these are across all of our different partners, where we have Engage, which is our behavioral engagement software that allows institutions to be able to see not only the traffic on their website, but what individuals are doing and where they're spending their time. You know, as I spoke with our partners, as we were transitioning in the very beginning of the COVID era, if you will, there was a lot of concern about how do we remain connected? And one of the things that we have known for some time, right, even pre-COVID, is that the students and their families are on your site. They're gaining and accessing information that's important to them when it's important to them. And so to reassure folks, the statement was, traffic's not slowing, right? As you mentioned, you can see that little dip in the experience. And I do believe that that came from students and their families trying to figure out what the world was going to look like for their immediacy, right? What is high school going to look like? Will I be able to go to prom? Will we be able to graduate? How will that work? And so I think everyone took a pause from the interwebs, if you will, and then dove back in knowing that they are natural consumers in this environment. And the context of COVID allowed for more tools for them to engage virtually, which what we found with this generation is something that they really appreciate.
So in our current environment, as Heather was saying, it's really essential that we provide that needed web and digital presence in response to this. And it's also essential that we gain that deeper insight and can measure the effectiveness of our web presence. That's really critical during this time, not just now, but also for the foreseeable future. So let's take a look at the tool set. We have our traditional tool set that we've used for years and years that are tried and true, that are either no longer happening or things have changed. So what are the tools needed now and in the future? Heather just brought up this recent survey, and 2 of the 4 highest ranked mechanisms for contact or engagement and outreach have been put on hold or on pause: the campus visit and also the test taking. So the ramifications of this are really significant. That said, number 1, which is leading the pack, is really the request for information form. So I'm going to throw a few questions out there as food for thought for you as we go through this. Are your request for information form numbers up, or RFI, request for information forms, up? Are you measuring them? Are you counting them? What about your web traffic in general? Again, are you able to measure your web traffic? 3, how many of those visitors that are coming to your site are not filling out the RFI form? And so that's really, really important. Behavioral intelligence can help you with that. And behavioral intelligence is a tool that you can add now to that toolbox we were talking about.
Mm-hmm. I think for many of the enrollment professionals, Catherine, that we work with, and I'm certain for many of you, with the loss of an actual physical campus visit, right? There have been many different ways in which I've seen campus professionals or enrollment professionals respond to that. I've seen immense creativity, everything from very formal platform online sessions to informal Zoom chats, right? To figuring out ways to be able to make a very personal experience feel live in this virtual environment. And then obviously with COVID and the inability for students to be able to sit for the ACT and the SAT, the question has been, as one of our major inquiry pool builders, what do we do if we can't have access to test taking data? And so that's been a conversation that we have been exploring with our partners over the last several months to help brainstorm ways to continue to bring in good lead data, right, suspect data, to be able to cultivate and build the inquiry pool.
Thanks, Heather.
And then lastly is really getting started. It can be the hardest part. It can be challenging. You don't know where to start. So we're going to give you some tips and tactics as Heather dives in. We don't have to throw our legacy plans out. We can build and evolve and fold in new strategies as we go. So Heather, I'll let you kind of take it from here and get into some of the tactics and how to get our ducks in a row.
Fantastic. What I would love to hear from all of you in the chat, and please feel free to pop it in, is what was one of the most creative things or mechanisms that you use to be able to engage with your students in this virtual environment? You can just pop in some of the cool stuff that you and your teams have been doing. You can see a quote here from Gil Rogers, who is the Vice President of Marketing at Platform Q, which is one of the online platforms that are out there. But I have heard amazing stories and great creativity and always love to hear more. So feel free to drop in things that you have been doing as you and your team shifted into this virtual recruitment environment. As we talk with our partners and as we continue through, I'll share some stories of how our partners have been changing the way that they think about recruitment, right? And looking at not only the 2020 class, but looking ahead to 21 and 22 as we continue to build our future. It is incredibly important to be able to do both, right? And I think that one of the most critical things is continuing to move. The notion of this being a temporary way in which we engage with our students, I think is short-sighted. And I think many of the enrollment professionals that I've spoken with over the last several months have talked about how, as they are experimenting with different ways in which to connect with their student, that there are things that they will continue forward, because let's be honest, these Gen Zers and their families, this now has become an expected vehicle, right, for communication and interaction that they enjoy and will expect in the future. So it's a question of how do we blend some of our tried and true, more traditional recruitment tactics along with the new platforms, the new engagement vehicles that we've been experimenting with over the last 3 months, and refining those strategies. So as we think about getting our ducks in a row, right? We got to move, we got to keep moving because that class is coming and the next ones are out there in the future. What do we need to think about? And so as we think about 2020 in general, how can you utilize behavioral intelligence? So understanding what your students and their families are doing and what they need when you can't necessarily have the more traditional in-person conversations. How can we leverage late applicants in our recruitment cycle? So as we know, and I'm sure you all have read as many of the surveys as I have, they are plentiful, right? And they all give us a little bit different insight, but themes that we've heard, right, in 2020 is that students and their families, as they're thinking about where they're going to attend, there is a significant percentage of students who are considering staying closer to home. And so some of those late applicants that are in your 60 to 90 mile radius are an incredible opportunity to be able to pull them or re-engage them in the 2020 cycle, as they and their families are having conversations about what the future looks like for them as a family in this college choice process. Obviously thinking about transfers, right? With the best practices guidelines shifting, also with the notion of potentially students reconsidering their enrollment to stay closer to home, that there's an opportunity. The key to this in 2020 is being able to expedite the process. So making things as smooth and seamless for a transfer student as possible to be able to consider or reconsider coming home, right, to your institution. One of the stories that I heard from a vice president who sat on a panel during our virtual conference, she talked a lot about the orientation process in MELT prevention, right? And this is where behavioral intelligence and our virtual engagement that we're doing on our virtual campuses, or for some who have returned back to campus, is thinking about how best to utilize the orientation program as not just another step in the process, but a way to ensure that the deposited students that you have are locked for fall. And so what are the needs that they have? Can we reimagine what that is? And if you are in the midst of orientation programming, actually just yesterday I spoke with one of our partners who had 2 orientation sessions over the weekend, and they had a lot of conversations about how to do what would be traditional sessions, right, in person and on campus, but to deliver that information in units. So that students can engage with different parts of the content as they will, instead of having to sit in a virtual session for a super long time. And then obviously self-guided tours, as we think about how to expose and create that experience that so many students and families yearn for when choosing a college for their enrollment. How do you provide that experience for them? One of the ways obviously is through self-guided tours. There we go, there's 2021. The notion again of utilizing behavioral intelligence to understand what your prospective students and their families, as we look at sophomores, juniors, and rising seniors, what they're doing on their site, what is most important to them from a content perspective. So as you think about the types of tactics that you'll use or add into your recruitment tool bucket, this behavioral information can help inform some of those decisions. And I love all of the conversations. You guys, one thing that truly, and I probably have said it 4 times now because I get so excited, the creativity and the ability to think outside of the box, forced by COVID, but I think is a beautiful place in our industry today. I applaud you all for the types of things that you're doing right now. It is awesome. So back to the presentation. I can't help myself. So assessing and revamping, again, the virtual effort. So over the last 4 months, you've deployed different ways in which you've engaged with your students and their families, and taking a moment, right, to take a breath and evaluate whether or not it worked. And if it didn't work, what else could you do? If it was okay, how could you and your team adjust the strategy, refine it based on the information that you know about what your students and families want, and go from there, and deploy those as regular parts of your recruitment process now. And obviously the extensive use of web, digital, and virtual experiences. Most, I would say, have, even pre-COVID, most enrollment professionals were deploying digital strategies, right? Our students are consumers. They are in the place they want to be. And so we need to meet them there. As we continue forward, this virtual or semi-virtual environment that we need to be able to maintain will increase that need. Over the last 3-4 months, we've shared and showed the market that as colleges and universities, right, we can go there. And so now that we're there, we need to continue and amp those strategies going forward. And then obviously continuing the virtual tour concept. I think that there is a ton of value in the combination of traditional tactics and some of the new engagement tools that we've been using through time, simply because it provides convenience and access, right? Students and their families choose which communication channel they want to communicate with you. And now they have the opportunity to be able to choose the engagement channel, which I think is an incredibly powerful moment for us as enrollment professionals, and certainly for the students and families that we serve. We have a couple of months left, right, of summer. And I would imagine for many, we have a lot of work ahead of us still, right? Of the folks that I've spoken with in our partner base, many, even though they may be trending either at benchmarking or slightly above, there are some that are tracking slightly below. In all of those cases, they are all of the teams that we're working with know that they need to continue forward with 2020 and keep driving because of the unknown aspects of what we're experiencing. I think there are very few that are sitting back and saying, I think we're good. And so as we think about the summer, right, and the next 60 days, one of the vice presidents that I spoke with yesterday and just prepping and thinking about our session and how to bring valuable information to you. She shared with me that within her next 60-day plan, and right now their numbers are trending to be about where they anticipated pre-COVID. So the good thing for them is that is, thank goodness. But she did say that there's no rest for the weary, right? That she needs to continue to drive her team and strategies to ensure that those 2020 numbers stay where they are and they successfully seat the class that they're hoping for. But essentially, what she has done is established a set of work teams. So these are special project teams beyond regular recruitment responsibilities. They have laid out different special initiatives that they're focusing on for 2020 to ensure those numbers land. And so they've divided the team out and made special assignments. She said that as they had this strategic conversation within their admissions team, it was really empowering because beyond asking a counselor to make sure that they have a good relationship, to make sure that they understand where that family is, to make sure that they're taking the steps forward, it's giving them some responsibility in the strategy beyond just their particular recruitment pool. Obviously, internal pushes, right? So taking a look at what strategies have worked over the last 4 months, which engagement channels have worked, where do we need to put more resources or time into? They are focusing on web tracking. So as Catherine has talked about multiple times, this notion of behavioral intelligence, being able to see where students and their families are. And I'll show you a couple of examples here in a slide or two. But understanding when you can see that a student is spending a ton of time on the financial aid page, right? This is a very natural indicator that either one, they're at that point in the process, which is fantastic. Glad to know that they're engaging with the content we need them to, or perhaps they have some questions or are feeling some barriers to the future. And their commitment to your institution. And so our partners who utilize this behavioral data and the web tracking are able to see those insights about their prospective students and intervene in ways that are very natural, but guided by data. And then obviously continuing to be aware. So much like the vice president that I was speaking to yesterday, while she feels confident, she is continuing to push and continuing to be aggressive towards 2020 to ensure that they aren't missing a data point that might cause the class to stray or numbers to move off of where they anticipated to. And then we've talked multiple times about enhanced digital engagement. So whether it's responsive information on your website, it is digital campaigns, right? Digital marketing and using those channels, using social media, all of the different ways in which students are connecting with the world today and seeking information. So that is very much what we have talked with many of our partners with, but most recently the conversation that I had with one of our vice presidents who's at a mid-sized private in the Midwest. So as we think about a couple of real life examples of how you can take behavioral intelligence, or how folks that we work with have taken behavioral intelligence and turned it into something that has been helpful for their team to be able to engage in a more personalized way with their students and families, and also helped with funnel development at different stages. So I'm going to tell you a couple stories. All of the data and all of the examples are associated with an institution that we work with, mid-sized private institution, I would say mid-selectivity, and in the Mid-Atlantic region. And so as we talk about, that just frames some of their experiences. So as I spoke with the vice president at this particular institution in prepping for this conversation, and she had joined us on a panel at our virtual conference as well. We think about the three steps that she and her team went through in responding to COVID, shifting strategies, and forgive me, I'm moving boxes around so I can see. The first thing they did was, we need to take action. What do we need to do right now? I just moved my entire team, my entire staff off campus. They are working remotely for the first time, and now we need to learn how to engage with our prospective students and their families in channels that we may not have used before. How many of you share stories about how remote work went with you and your staff? Any challenges that you experienced? That would be awesome stories. I've worked remotely for, my gosh, over a decade at this point. And so it's been fun having conversations, listening to how folks shifted from normal work environment into working at home, potentially with a partner or spouse there, children there, and trying to connect with families who are experiencing the same thing. So thank you for the work that you've done. I know that it is not easy. For this particular institution, the Vice President of Enrollment talked about that one of the first things that they did, right, was to convert content from campus events into the virtual environment. And then finding channels to be able to add live conversation to this process for her and her team. After they got through that first wave, right? So what are we going to do to just dump everything that we've done live and in person and shift the channel? They moved into what essentially is the now what, right? They took a look at, here are the ways in which we did it for the first month. This is what worked. This is what didn't. And let's take an iteration pass on it. So how can we make this better than what we experienced over the first month, so that in our next month, if we're still virtual, that we can improve upon that experience. A lot of what they did initially was focused on group events, large events, right? There were open houses that needed to be converted. There were admitted student days that needed to be converted. So the more immediate large event type experiences. And next level, the iteration that they went through was, how do we create environments for our counselors and their prospective students to have conversations together that they may have had traditionally on campus in a room after a tour, right? And so they created several different tools and engaged with that with their students to be able to try and connect as much of that typical live experience in person into that virtual environment. As they got the events settled and how they were going to engage virtually, with the 2020 class, she said that it was incredibly important that they shift their focus to 2021. She said, you know, we are uncertain of how 2020 will go, right? Every benchmark that I had, every conversion point that I knew was uncertain, because we weren't sure how students and their families would react to the conversion to virtual, and how their decision-making might change. And so while they continued to drive to 2020, she knew that for the health of the institution, for the health of the relationship with the younger students, that they had to shift their focus and strategies into the 2021 class and 2022 as well. And so as they thought about the future and those younger students and the recruitment and development of the funnel for the future health of the institution, that step 3 for her was really thinking about the future in a forward direction. And the biggest question, right, and I think this is on the minds of many enrollment professionals across the country, is how will we acquire the names and the data that we are used to when there are fewer test taking opportunities for students right now? And so we actually worked with this particular institution through a couple of different partnerships that we have made through time with agencies that collect student data outside of the test taking traditional sources, so College Board and ACT. We did that really intentionally to try and help bridge the gap, right? ACT and College Board aren't going away. But if we have fewer test takers right now, how can we fill that gap with quality information about potential students that would be the right fit for your institution? So we developed those partnerships and helped this particular institution bridge that gap as we look forward. One of the conversations that I had with her, which was very interesting, was about the notion of more and more institutions going test optional, right? The potential of the California system developing their own test for entrance, and how that would impact students' choice to engage with College Board and ACT going forward. The question is the answer is no one really knows. We'll see as it goes. But I think it's going to be incredibly important for us to be able to source student data from multiple sources that were perhaps a little more non-traditional than we are used to. So one of the tools that this particular institution had is Engage. As Catherine mentioned, that's part of our platform, the base of behavioral intelligence. It's a behavioral tracking software that allows you to see what student behavior is at an individual level and also react to that with content served to them during their visit to your website. That allows for relevant, timely, and personalized communications in a channel that we all know that they're in. And as you can see from one of our previous slides, that 37% increase in virtual engagement through the website, the need for personal engagement that's relevant and timely to the students in your web environment is incredibly important today. I'm going to show you a couple of examples from the same institution that I've been talking about. This is focused on transfers. So we were able to write a rule set, basically an if-then statement, right, for them that focused on individuals engaging with their transfer pages. This is one of the strategies that this vice president was focused on in 2020 and looking forward. And we wanted to make sure that we engaged with students with a personal story so they could see themselves at that particular campus. So if an individual is on the site, hit 2 or more transfer pages and stayed in that environment, we served this piece of content actually as the student was surfing. You can see here some of the results. And I think one of the most important things that I'll point out here is the number of impressions. I mean, there were, sorry, this little box is in the way, over 12,000 impressions served just from this particular rule set. So students who engaged with the transfer pages, we were able to connect with those students in a virtual environment in the channel that they were choosing. So that's one example. A second is a progressive identification form. Yeah, Catherine.
I think we're like 3 minutes from the end.
Perfect. Almost there. This is another way. And essentially, for anyone who came to the site, consider this an on-demand inquiry form, right? Here are some of the results. I think the most important thing is that there were 484 forms submitted that were not already in their admissions pool, and 152 or 31% of those went on to apply later. This is just going to quickly visualize for you what we can see and what the enrollment professionals that are using behavioral intelligence can see as a student moves through their website experience with you. So this is Jane. This is an actual prospective student with this particular institution. And you can see here that we've been able to visualize not only the funnel movement, but the types of marketing intervention and engagement that they had. Ultimately, this particular student had been on the site almost 60 different times, deposited for the institution. We'll see how she comes in the fall and whether or not she is going to ultimately enroll. Tools that we developed that their team, the counselors, are using, things like our daily visitor report that allow you to visualize the prospective students on the site, and then indices that allow you to assess and evaluate the level of engagement of a particular student, either in a short window or through time. So I think, Catherine, I have left you 1 minute to summarize what we've been talking about today.
Fantastic. Perfect. Okay. So first and foremost, leverage your website. You know, we know there's increased traffic, so really get in there with your behavioral intelligence and use the data and digital tools. Retool your toolbox, add some new tools, evolve that toolbox, and really optimize what you're doing with your digital forms, do some digital surveys to help generate leads, and add on to your traditional tool set. And then lastly, just get started. We know it's hard to get started, but do short bursts or move in these short sprints, measure everything, and be brave and imaginative. We hope this session today has been helpful. This is my contact information for you if you have any follow-up questions or want to chat further. Thank you so much for your chat input. Heather, any closing?
No, thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to continue the conversation, we're happy to. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of the conference. As I was looking through the schedule, there's some pretty amazing sessions. So thanks again for joining. Have a great rest of your day.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Jeanette.
Absolutely. That was awesome.
Very cool. Is there anything you need from us?
Nope. You are good.
Awesome. Awesome.
Have a
Thank
fabulous rest of the day.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.